The Capitals got a lot tougher by adding Ryan Leonard.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is all about each player being a perfect fit. The same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Capitals selecting Ryan Leonard at number 8 and why you should be excited about it. We'll talk about that in the show a little bit later. We will talk about how will Ryan Leonard help this team. I know that he is only 18 years old and he's going to be playing for Boston College in the fall, but in this, I would say mid to long term, I think he is going to be a perfect fit for this team. And then just to start it off here, we will talk about ultimately why the Capitals selected Ryan Leonard. Well, first of all, if you're an everydayer, you know that in yesterday's show, I talked about how the Capitals should be all in on Matvei Michkov. And where did he go? Surprise, surprise, too surprised. I'm not surprised. He went to the Philadelphia Flyers. And what is one of the things that we know? I know that Brian McClellan did his level best to try to work a deal with the Montreal Canadiens, the Habs, to try to trade up. So it would have made Michkov available to the Capitals. Obviously, that wasn't the case as the Capitals did not land Michkov. But who did they get? They still got a really excellent player in Ryan Leonard, a huge guy, 6 foot, and brings a physicality to his game. So there is a lot to like about adding Ryan Leonard to this team. Just taking a look at some of his stats alone, 51 goals and 43 assists for 94 points in 57 games with the U.S. National Team Development Program, where he primarily played on a line with Will Smith and Gabriel Perreault. He also showcased his skill on the penalty kill and an alternate captain for the club. So there is a lot to like about him. 6 foot, 190 pounds. And one of the things that they were saying, if you were watching the draft, is he's got muscles everywhere. It looks like he's got muscles on his face. And an interesting thing while watching the show is he looks somewhat similar to the same kind of build that Tom Wilson had when he was first with the Capitals, when he was a much younger man. So this is going to be a dynamic team at some point with Tom Wilson and Ryan Leonard on the same team. That is one of the things that I spoke to about on Locked On NHL is you guys thought this team was tough with Tom Wilson. Wait till it's Ryan Leonard and Tom Wilson at some point. This will be a team to be reckoned with, and there is a lot to be excited about. So ultimately, why did the Capitals select Ryan Leonard? I believe that they were all in on Matvei Michkov, but the Philadelphia Flyers, who were number 7, swooped in and took him. Let's be honest, there were a lot of surprises in the draft. There were a lot of surprises for me. One of the things I learned about watching the draft tonight is a lot of the different mock drafts that I've seen, pretty much everywhere. None of them got it right. Absolutely none of them got it right. When you take a look at, Arizona and who they picked, and it was just so crazy. I thought Fantilli was going to go number 2. Everybody thought that Fantilli was going to go number 2. So it was just an interesting night altogether. So then when it came to the Capitals' turn, I thought, there's Dalibor Dvorsky, there's Zachary Benson. Who are they going to select they selected Ryan Leonard. And, he wasn't one of the players that I had pegged for them to draft, but the more I read about him, I was vaguely familiar with him, but the more I read about him, the more I liked. And I liked his physical game. I like the intangibles that he brings to this team at some point. I think it is going to be a perfect fit at some point. He's one of the most versatile players, like I said, out there. Though he's not the most creative or flashy player, Ryan Leonard still possesses a lot of skill and makes up for it with an unparalleled work ethic and quickness. He can think on the fly and has an incredible scoring sense, which makes him an asset to any team, writes the Hockey News. So there is a lot to like about him. He can score goals. He is a leader. He's got that big physical presence that we like. And a young man at only 18 years old, he definitely fits what the Capitals are looking for, getting younger, getting faster. And, if you kind of take a look at it, everything is kind of coming together perfectly at the right time, because by the time he is ready to break it big in the NHL, well, that's going to be darn near the time that Alex Ovechkin is ready to hang up the skates. I mean, maybe he has even a quicker trajectory. Maybe he'll be ready, next season or 3 years from now, whatever the case may be. But if you kind of can just sit back a little bit and take a look at what this Capitals team will look like in years to come. Just kind of sit back and look on the horizon and think about what can be. When you have Ivan Miroshnichenko on this team, when you have Connor McMichael, when you have Hendrix Lapierre, it is exciting to think about. And then when you add him to the equation as well, I think that Leonard will be a really great fit on this team. Again, the thing of it is that these are, when you take a look at the draft, very few of these players will be players that are going to be ready next season. Okay, so there are exceptions to every rule. Of course, Connor Bedard is going to be helping out the Chicago Blackhawks next season. But what we hear is that Leonard wants to honor his commitment to the college that he's going to. Capitals first round pick Ryan Leonard says he plans to honor his commitment to Boston College before turning his attention to the pros. He'll be joining a fellow first round pick and U18 line mate Will Smith. So quite a lineup, and just a really great draft in general. I don't recall being this excited about watching a draft in some time, and I understand why that is, because the Capitals have a first pick in the first round in quite some time. But I am excited, even though he is not the player that I thought the Capitals were going to draft. I am excited about the possibility of how he's going to be able to help this team. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But as Capitals fans, you should be excited. They didn't get their guy, and I'm going to put that in quotes because I guess that the guy is different for everyone. They didn't get Matvei Michkov. Everyone out there thought that was going to be the player that was going to be on the Capitals. It seemed like a hand in glove situation, a fellow Russian countryman, and it just seemed like the makings of something great. But I do think the Capitals got, I don't even want to say the second best. I want to say a 1A, 1B, the 1B here in this situation. And I think that's Ryan Leonard. And I do think that he is going to be just what the doctor ordered. The funny thing is a lot of the commentators on the draft said that they thought that Leonard would have been a good fit on the Flyers. How interesting that the player that they thought would be good on the Flyers is on the Capitals and vice versa. It's just kind of interesting how those things work out. But as far as the kind of player that they're going to get with Leonard, again, he is going to be that physical presence, and he has a great physicality to his game. He's got a good goal scoring touch. Plus, he can, work it in the grimy areas, get some of those dirty goals. That's what they're talking about there. And just taking a look at what kind of player he's going to end up being in time, I guess it remains to be seen. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily always translate, but from what I hear here, he's going to be great. Quick hands, great hockey IQ, and he's highly coachable player with a lot of talent and character. That was one of the things that was drawn into question with Michkov, was his character, how he didn't want to do interviews and how he seemed like he was elusive, that kind of thing. So I think that, they have a player of good character in Leonard. So I think that it is going to be a good position for them to be in. But again, like, his stats just are quite impressive. 51 goals, 43 assists, 94 points in 57 games. That is impressive. That is a premier player on this team that is going to be able to help them in not too long. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will be soon. Ryan Leonard said hearing his name called by the Capitals was the second favorite moment of the year behind only scoring the gold winning goal in the World Junior Championship. So he is stoked. He is fired up to be a Capital. And as Caps fans, you should be excited about what this means going forward because on paper, like I said, he seems like he is going to be just the perfect fit for this team. Is that ultimately going to be the case? I guess time will only tell. All right, so coming up here, we will talk about ultimately how will he help this team? Where is he going to fit in? It is going to be a work in progress, in my opinion. It's not going to be something that he's going to be playing this fall. He will be able to help this team in years to come. What will it mean? We'll talk about that straight ahead. Covering my nutritional basis for a day literally couldn't be easier, which is why I chose AG1. I just mix one small scoop with water and drink it first thing each morning. And one thing that we all need to pay attention to is our health. It is that much easier with AG1. I also like that it costs less than $3 a day. Pretty good if you ask me. It's a really effective daily habit with high quality sourced ingredients. It is a win win. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1 year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs of AG1. Just go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Check it out. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube, as I have a lot of great coverage for you guys this summer, just like the draft and free agency. Not to mention, I have John Walton coming on the show in just a couple of weeks. So make sure and subscribe or follow to Locked On Capitals today. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Capitals select Ryan Leonard. And, it wasn't, again, like a player that a lot of people thought was going to come to this team. I think that there were, it wasn't one of, in the mock drafts, I did not see him linked to this team. I heard Dalibor Dvorsky. I've heard Benson. I've heard a bunch of other different players that were linked to this team, but I never heard Leonard as being attached to the Capitals. So it is an interesting thing, but he does kind of fit the blueprint of the kind of player that the Capitals generally pick historically, kind of that big bulking frame, a possible intimidation factor. I think he has the makings of potentially being, a Tom Wilson 2.0. Is that actually going to be the case? I guess it remains to be seen. But how do I see him fitting into the Capitals? How do I see him helping this team? Like I said, it is not going to be a situation where he's going to be able to help them this fall. It might be 2 or 3 years from now, but he is going to take the place of a lot of these players on this team that are getting older. By that point, TJ Oshie, Nick Backstrom, Alex Ovechkin will have either hung up the skates, be playing on another team, something like that. So at that point, they are going to need this next wave of players to give a new identity to the Capitals in years to come. And if this is just the beginning of it, then I am really happy in the direction that things are going in. Like I talked about in the first segment there, just think about what this team's going to look like at one point. Tom Wilson will be the captain. I do believe that. You take a look at Ryan Leonard out there, two huge dudes out there, not to mention Connor McMichael, Hendrix LaPierre, Ethan Frank. It is going to be just a really great team, and it is going to be the look of this team for years to come. So how is Leonard going to be able to help the Caps? Well, he's going to be able to do it because if he can continue to get the same kind of production that he's had so far in the National Hockey League, it is going to be that scoring touch that you're looking for. It is going to be that physical presence, that intimidation factor that is so, what a lot of NHL teams are looking for. And that's one of the things that I think that he can help out this team with the most. He has got a good scoring sense. He's got a good hockey IQ. Sometimes they draft these guys, and one of the things that Ross Mahoney said is that he said that we want to draft the best possible player available. One of the things that was really noticeable in the draft tonight was that there were a lot of teams that were drafting for they were drafting for a position of need, like Arizona drafting a defenseman so early, kind of defied logic. It's not really what I saw coming from this team. But with the Capitals, I think in Ryan Leonard, they drafted the best player available. But I also think that they drafted a player that the Capitals have in need in the future, a winger. That is one of the things that they're looking for. What is one of the things that Brian McClellan had spoke about is that he wanted to address the top six. And I know it is not addressing the top six for next season, but it will be a player that is going to help this team in years to come. And that's one of the things to really hone in on is his scoring ability, his physical presence. If you saw him walk on the stage, again, an imposing guy, a big dude, like the commentator said, it looks like he's got muscles on his face. This is going to be the prototypical Washington Capital player that seems so apparent now that his name is attached to this team. I did not pick him as the draft pick for this team, but now that I'm reading about him, now that I see him and what kind of player he is, it almost seems like a perfect hand in glove situation. And I, for one, am pretty excited about how good this Capitals team is going to be in years to come. Let's face it, this last year, we didn't get the results that we were looking for. Next year, it's going to be a work in progress. That is when you're going to see Connor McMichael. You're going to see those young players. And then in years to come, that is when you're going to see Ryan Leonard and that kind of thing come to this team. That is how he is going to be able to help out this team in years to come, is that, finally we can put to rest all of that this team needs to get younger and faster. They are headed in that direction. It's just going to take a little bit of time. All right, so straight ahead, we will talk about historically what kind of player is Ryan Leonard and what can we expect, and who is he intrinsically. We'll talk about that straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Capitals select Ryan Leonard at number 8. There are future rounds that will take place tomorrow, but I watched it pretty much up until round after the Capitals selected Ryan Leonard. I watched it for a bit more, and then I had to start recording for this show. But there were some surprising picks out there. The Capitals picking Ryan Leonard does seem to be a good fit on this team. But what kind of player is Leonard historically? What is the scouting report? A high-end sniper, Leonard owns a shot that combines a nice mix of speed and accuracy, allowing him to get it off quickly without hesitation. When given room on the power play, he can let his shot fly and hold his own around the net in physical situations. The younger brother of Nashville Predators prospect John Leonard has a pro pedigree written all over him and should be a solid secondary score in the NHL. That was the assessment of the Daily Faceoff. So a sniper, a guy that has a good shot, a guy that doesn't need to be necessarily up close to the net. He can make shots from distance. He can make them close up. That is what is exciting. Also, the speed and accuracy. Sometimes you see a lot of hockey players out there and they're just wildly shooting the puck on the net. When you have skilled players out there like Ryan Leonard, sometimes you don't need to just waste those shots out there, as he has an accurate shot most of the time. If you watch some of his highlight footage, which I've done since the draft here, he does seem to be, the next great player on the Capitals. So just adding that high, quality scoring touch to this team seems to be like a really positive thing going forward. Some of the comments that I've already heard on Twitter are they're like, they wasted a draft pick. He's not going to be a player that's going to help them next year. Let's face it, at number 8, I don't think that there was going to be a player available that was going to be able to help them at number 8. But, if you take a look at Leonard, if he can live up to what kind of player he is historically, it is going to happen sooner than later. And he is a young guy at the end of the day. It's not like he is, a guy that's 23, 24 years old and, is already on the wrong end. He was drafted, of course, at 18. And of course, he's not going to be ready. He was drafted number 8. And if you kind of take a look at the draft players surrounding him, I don't think that any of them are really NHL ready right now. I guess there could be exceptions, like I talked about Bedard, potentially like Fantilli, some of those players. But some of them, they're just too young. They're not ready to go yet. So I think that it's all right. And I'm, actually kind of happy that he is honoring his commitment to playing in college his last year. It's going to help him work on his game. So he's going to even be one, step, maybe multiple steps better when his opportunity approaches, and he might need some time down in Hershey. That's okay. It's not all the time that a player goes, straight from the draft into the NHL. They're not all going to be just a straight line shot. So, Capitals fans, one of the big things that they were bummed about was if they picked Mishkov, he wasn't going to be ready next year. As it turns out, the same thing is going to be the case with Leonard. Caps fans, when this is the draft here, it is not going to be making this team. It's not like you traded. It's not like, you picked up a guy from another team. It is about having a good player in the future and about, building a good team in the future. And like I said, if you kind of sit back and kind of picture what this team is going to be in years, it is going to be unstoppable. Not to mention just the plethora of talent that they have in net, in the AHL and the ECHL. And then you start to take a look, at the defense as well, Vinny Iorio, and you take a look at the forwards and how this is all coming together. Not to mention whatever Brian McClellan happens to do on July 1st. Caps fans, don't despair. I've heard a lot of negativity about this team, that it's not going in the right direction. Just what happened tonight. This was the perfect draft. Was it the guy that I picked? No, but I think that he is the perfect fit for this team. If you just take a look at what kind of player he is and what he can bring to this team, it seems like just the perfect scenario for this Caps team. So as Caps fans, you should be excited about what is to coming up next here. So just to wrap up the show here, the Capitals do select Ryan Leonard, 8th overall. Not exactly who everyone thought they were going to pick. He's not going to be ready in the fall. That is, if there is any bad news, that's the bad news. We wanted someone to help this team right away. Let's face it, at number 8, that probably was not going to happen. And then historically, what kind of player is he? He is a player that has, a good high hockey IQ, speed and accuracy, high-end sniper. These are all A+++. There is no negative in any of this. If you take a look at the scouting report for him, there's not a lot of negativity there. A lot of these players that they drafted in the draft, if you kind of scroll down, there's a bunch of negative traits on him. There's not a lot of negative traits on Leonard. So the Capitals fans, you should ultimately be happy with the selection tonight. Again, not a player that a lot of other people picked for the Capitals. But once you read into it, once you see what kind of player he is, you can see that it is the perfect fit. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. And are you an everydayer of Locked On Capitals? Well, I would sure love to hear from you. Just hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 or at Locked On Caps and say, hey, Dan, I'm an everydayer. I'll give you a shout out on Friday's show. And are you a fan of other DC sports? Well, Locked On has got you covered. We got Locked On Nationals, we got Locked On Commanders and Wizards. So no matter what kind of major sport out there in the DC areas, Locked On has got you covered. And not even that. Even though the NHL season has wrapped up and the only big event going on between now and the beginning of next season is free agency, we are talking hockey year-round on Locked On NHL. So make sure when you're done watching or listening to this show, head on over to Locked On NHL, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, my name is Dan Holme of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll talk to you again next time.